This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, April 29th, 2022. And I have the excellent Nirave.
Hello, darling. It's nice to be back.
Yes, of course. I'm so glad you made it. Look, I haven't had you on in a while, and I was just like, I really need to get Nirave on again. And we finally made it work. It's taken a few tries, but here we are. So thanks for being on the show. And of course, let's talk about some news items and some reviews. Have you been able to look at the stuff? Have you read some of these Nord N20 5G reviews from OnePlus out there?
I have. Now, I've got to say, it feels like they're going back to their roots in some way, where it's good value. It looks good. It reminds me of the OnePlus X in so many ways.
It does, right?
But, come on. The biggest mistake they've made is this stupid naming scheme.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to be able to change that now because they have... So, let's rewind it a little bit. What we're really talking about here is the new OnePlus Nord N20 5G. I covered it on last week's show when it was announced, but I reviewed it. My review for Hot Hardware will be in the show notes. And, let's go through a history of this because, the Nord came out in the summer of 2020, and it was a true return to form. It was really Ka-Pei's final effort at OnePlus to really sing to the fans, right? We can all agree on that. Would you say?
Yeah, I think in many ways, if you think about OnePlus at its root, it was that idea of affordable flagship. And as they suddenly just went to, well, we're going to charge the same price as everybody else, the Nord became that throwback to their root, that original, this is OnePlus as we know it.
And they did a good job with it. I think they managed to nail that. And I think Carl drove that really hard because he was in charge of that whole thing. But then we found out that wasn't coming to the US. And so our consolation prize was the N series. The Nord N10 5G and the Nord N100 were the first for the US. And they were, unlike the Nord, which was almost a flagship, but in a kind of a competitive segment of the $500-ish price point, like premium mid-range, affordable pseudo flagship. The N series was really kind of way further down there. So the N10 5G came out at $300. And, some of the compromises it made was, an LCD instead of an OLED. It was still a high refresh rate. It had a Snapdragon 690 5G. It had, a 64 megapixel camera that wasn't very good because it's an OmniVision sensor, a crappy 8 megapixel ultra wide. It was no alert slider. It was very plasticky, very generic. It had a fingerprint sensor mounted in the back. I reviewed it and I wasn't a big fan. It was okay. You still had that snappy OnePlus experience. Somehow they managed to make it work because Oxygen OS at the time was still its own thing. And it was okay, but it was like, man, we were kind of put off, right? The N100 I'm not even going to talk about because it's a 4G phone and it was very affordable. And I never played with it, so I don't know. But then we got the N200 5G last year, and that was $240. And lo and behold, it didn't look like a generic phone anymore. It had a personality. It looked more like an Oppo. And that makes a lot of sense now because they were merging at the time. But it was in a good way. Like there are some Oppos that I like and some Oppos I don't. This was more like a Reno and it worked. It had the funky colors, like, the gradient. And it was plastic, but it felt much nicer. Most importantly, it was $240 and it kicked butt for that. It had Oxygen OS pre-Color OS, so it was fast. It ran on a Snapdragon 480, which looked like it was going to be a disaster, but it actually did okay with that. And again, the same LCD display as the N10, 90 hertz. And, cameras were just an afterthought. But here's the thing, Nirav. That phone's cameras were actually better than the 64 megapixel because they were well tuned. They were a known sensor. They're just like a 13 megapixel or something. So fast forward to today, and we get this N20 5G. And I was like, okay, this could go very wrong or very right. And you know, within the N series, right? Like it's not going to be a Nord. It's not going to be a Nord 2. By the way, you got the Nord 2 last summer in 21, and that thing was just as great as the original Nord. It was MediaTek powered instead of Snapdragon powered, but whatever. But we should also talk about the India market that got the, you know, R series and the CE series. And I think Europe got the CE series. So they fragmenting their lineup so much in this lower mid range, right? Like, what do you think their strategy is here? Like, what's going on? I don't get it. Like,
I think everyone, and it's not just OnePlus and Oppo, I think everyone has looked at Xiaomi and gone, we can do that.
Part spinning.
Yeah, and it's literally like...
They are the kings of part spinning, Xiaomi.
They're taking the same thing. However, I don't see a lot of people ever acknowledge that the most famous manufacturer in the world is also doing the same bloody thing. Apple, if you look at the parts there and the second set of phones like your SE2 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know what? It's all designed to be the same thing. And it makes a lot of sense. From a supply chain, well, if we buy this, we know we can build for X number of phones. Samsung's doing it. So you first got to say credit to Xiaomi because they've indirectly in many ways and directly spun off the industry as we know it. To go back to OnePlus, the thing is, what's the difference between OnePlus, Oppo, Vivo? They're all
Realme. Vivo is in its own world out there.
But they're all BBK companies. And
Realme to me is the new OnePlus. Like Realme is really where it's at. Like that's why I don't understand why we have that proliferation of Nord, like and C's and R's. Like I can understand the core, like we have OnePlus flagships, core. We have the Nord, mid-range, like premium mid-range. We should have like a set of phones that are across the board for this N series and C stuff. But why did they differentiate them? It doesn't seem to make much sense to me from a cost effectiveness point of view.
I think it's
they're
because
so close.
The other brands cannot sell in much of Western markets.
Right.
But the biggest the biggest issue I think we foresee, in foreseeing this is they are diluting the OnePlus brand. A brand that
that's what I'm saying.
Had a lot of value and could be derived value. It started making inroads. That said, last year, death of LG. So the death of a whole bunch of small mid-range phones that carriers loved.
Well, in the US, the N series makes sense.
Yeah.
And we would talk about the N20 a bit more in a second. But I feel like it's the C I don't understand. Like, to me, Core Edition should be the N series. It should be the same phones. Like, you have Realme as a differentiating brand in India already. Why do you need the C OnePlus brand in addition to the R brand, in addition to the, main and then the Nord on top of that?
Well, let me ask you a question. And there'll be some people who take what I say as potentially xenophobic. It is not designed to be. Okay, I'm prefacing this with that, okay? What has always been the biggest issue with, and I'm going to locate this specifically with Chinese companies versus the big Korean companies and, American companies. What is the one thing that they fundamentally kind of always seem to, I'd say, fail at?
Do tell.
It's their understanding and the way they market to Western audiences.
Oh, yes, but that's no doubt.
The problem we have here is with OnePlus, I was going to say with OnePlus and Oppo homogenizing stuff. I think the better way is with BBK calling the shots now firmly for OnePlus, whereas when Carl was around, it was very much we're our own brand.
Yeah, like Vivo.
Yeah. OnePlus is taking the same routes that the rest of that company does, which is let's throw a bunch of stuff and see what works, but we don't mind because we're just throwing lots of stuff out there and we'll bamboozle customers.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that actually what you're saying is not correct for the US. The US strategy is very clear. You have the flagships and the N series. There is no confusion here.
It's perfect for the US, but it's the rest of the world.
We don't get Realme, right? We don't get Realme, so this not everything's fine. But I'm talking about India. It doesn't make sense in India when they already have Realme, Oppo, to have both the CE series and the R series and the Nord series. Like I know that the Indian market is very unique that way, but if you look at Xiaomi, their phones are almost identical except cosmetic differences. Whereas what BBK Group is doing is actual small variations. They're actually, like you can take a Redmi Note 11 Pro Plus 5G and it's exactly the same phone as the Poco X4 Pro 5G. The only difference is the chip and the charging speed, right? That's simple to understand. But when you look at the CE series versus the N series, there's enough difference. And then you look at Realme, what they're doing, and you're like, wait a minute. You literally have, it's not like, yes, they're part spinning BBK, but they're not doing what General Motors did in the 80s and 90s, which is like Oldsmobile makes the same car as Chevy, but it's slightly badged differently, right? So
I think
it seems like a cost thing. It seems like you're spending money to make these variations, and it's just not necessary when you have already got 3 brands in that market.
Well, here's the thing. There is also I reckon there's a desire to flood that market. And don't forget, there is a huge sentiment in India right now with the whole made in India thing, yeah? Which could be playing part into it. Some of these might be designed to be made in India and they're branded slightly differently because they want to be leveraging that, the taxes and whatever. And there is a whole thing there that I don't bloody understand, and I spend enough time looking at it. But what I think it fundamentally comes down to is it's literally like, can they flood the market with as many brands as possible and as many everything as possible, so that they have a greater chance of someone picking up one of their products versus everybody else. And there was a time where I remember this in the UK. That was the strategy for the UK when it was, and even for the US. So I think India as a market is just going through that, where everyone's like, flood it. And then 2 years from now, we will start to see it go to the point where it's decision fatigue. So everyone's like, let's pay all back.
Yeah, consolidation is going to have to happen at some point because it's more cost effective, right?
But for now, it's like flood it and hope for the best.
Yeah, absolutely. That's my only take on this, is that like, okay, in the context of this N20 5G, I think the US is very compartmentalized. It's very clear, right? And as you said,
and it looks good.
Well, let's talk about the phone in a sec, but in terms of market, like apparently OnePlus has grown 3x in the US alone just from the N series. Like, even though the N10, the original, was kind of lackluster, the N200 was great. This N20 is great, but they're eating Moto's lunch in many ways. But Moto claims that they're still number 3 in the US. And seeing Moto's latest offerings, we talked about this last week, and it was like really disappointing. For the pricing on those is so wrong, those Moto phones. So
they remind me of, do you know what they remind me of? They remind me of Sony in so many ways, where they might make, like, some of their phones are actually really nice.
No, the phones are good. It's just the pricing is completely off. $500 for the Stylus 5G? Are you kidding me?
They have a inflated sense of self-worth in such a way that it feeds into their marketing. And remember, we saw this with Sony. Do you remember when Sony tried to launch $1,000 compact phone?
Yes.
That was like, not even a full HD screen. And you're like, are you nuts? Like, someone somewhere is making bad decisions. But I guess the reason they try and price it at that is also because Moto is not selling these directly. They're taking that price, that MSRP pricing, And then you go into a Verizon store and pick up one of these. It's like, here's $5 a month.
Well, that's exactly right. That's the thing. Like, these phones end up in the discount bin within a month of being released, and they sell at the price they should be selling at. So maybe that's the strategy. But I feel like
it's a $500 phone that over 2 years you're only paying $150 for.
Yeah, because of the carrier tie-in, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's still hard to digest when they sell us these phones, like as media, like they pitch us these phones and say like, oh, look, we made a mid-ranger, with a crappy 50 megapixel camera and a capacitive stylus for $500. Are you kidding me? Like, no.
The one thing they haven't done that I think we're all waiting for is give us a new Razr.
Well,
prove that they can make something that is aspirational. Because I'll tell you something for Samsung. There's a lot of people out there who can't afford a Fold or a Flip or even the S22 range. But because they're phones that are inherently aspirational, and the same thing applies to Apple with the top end, because these are phones that are inherently aspirational and people aspire to, they then have the ability to sell the one at half the price that's 60% as good. And to most people, it's like, and I know this from working in retail for all those years, I got a Samsung. I'm happy with it because it's a Samsung. Motorola isn't aspirational.
Yeah. But you have to understand, the more problem is the Razr is priced more than the Flip, and it's a worse phone. Like,
yes, however,
TCL is the company who needs to come out with that Chicago phone. That's what needs to happen, because that's the phone
which I have in PA, and it's really bloody nice.
Yeah, with the carrier tie-ins, that phone could be undercut Samsung and actually make it. But I don't think Moto is ever in a price point position where they can compete with Samsung, because their prices are inflated. So even if they made a phone that with carrier subsidies would be cheaper than the Flip, they still wouldn't succeed in selling it, because when we would review it, we'd say this is overpriced.
That's true. However, I do think that there was, the Razr 5G, for example, fixed a lot of problems. Now,
it did, but it was too late.
Yeah, if Moto was to bring a Razr 2 that was fundamentally a good phone and was slightly overpriced, but was forthcoming, the problem is, when we go see a Samsung of the world, they tell us, hey, this is the price, but there's going to be all these deals and stuff like that.
Yeah, trade-ins and whatever.
Yeah, so we know that it's going to be affordable in through discounts and stuff. When Moto do it, they tell us 2 days before that this is the price, and then we're like, you could have told us this 3 weeks ago, because it changes how we feel about it, and then suddenly you're like, I gotta redo that. That said, I stick by it. I think the problem is there was a time when Motorola was aspirational. It was an aspirational brand. It wasn't for very long, but I think products like the Razr are what can make them aspirational and then make people more inclined to buy that. At the same time, I think they need to improve the price to value ratio of all of their products.
Yeah. I mean, we could go on about Moto. I don't want to. My biggest gripe with them right now is their pricing and their camera performance. It's to the point, as I was joking about multiple times on the podcast now, that we're using Moto camera performance as the baseline of bad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is very, very true.
We're comparing them as like, okay, you're not as bad as Moto, you're good. Like, that's exactly what I want to say about this N20 5G, like tying it back in. So let's talk about the phone. We've talked about the others. This one is $282 right now. It says T-Mobile exclusive at that price right now, but it'll be coming unlocked. We don't know what the pricing will be. But here's what you get for your money. Instead of an LCD, you get an AMOLED, but the compromise is it's not 90 hertz, it's 60 hertz, which I think, honestly, is
perfectly
a great compromise. The other thing you get is the 64 megapixel camera from the N10. So it's kind of meh, because it's, again, that same OmniVision sensor, but it's still better than Moto's at this price point, which is, again, that comparison. So would I say it's better than the N200 last year with that 13 megapixel? It's a crapshoot. The point is that the biggest disappointment in the cameras is not so much that it's okay, but not great. It's more that there's no ultra wide. So that's, I think, something they really should have done. The N200 didn't have an ultra wide last year, but it was $240. This is $282. It's very close to the $300 of the N10. And the N10 had an ultra wide. So there's two sticker cams back there, what I call useless cameras, 2 megapixel, a monochrome and a macro without autofocus that you're never going to use because you're going to use the 2x zoom on the main lens to take a macro photo anyway. So why not take one of those away and give us an 8 megapixel ultra wide? That would have been the smart move, right?
Those are just extra cameras for the sake of saying it's got 3 cameras.
Exactly, sticker cams. So the thing, though, that makes this phone so good is the specs. Snapdragon 695 5G, better chip than the 690 on the N10. It's in benchmarks almost as good as a Snapdragon 765G from, the Pixel 5a, right? So we're looking at pretty good. 6 gigs of RAM and 128 gigs of storage plus micro SD. I would like to point out as an aside that the flagship sold in the US by OnePlus, the 10 Pro, only has 128 gigs of storage and does not come with micro SD. So wow for $282. But the thing to me that really, really makes this phone sing and makes me go like, okay, maybe OnePlus still has some of its mojo left, which is what I said in my review, is the design. Holy crap ball, that thing looks so premium. Now it's all plastic, don't get me wrong. The little metal circles around the cameras are real aluminum though, there's gold, but anodized chamfered edges, very nice. But it's got that slab-sided design from the iPhone, but unlike the iPhone, they popped the display kind of to float on top of that. So it's got kind of like this really funky side view look. And then the back is this like typical Chinese phone, sparkly blue with this little reflective band at the bottom that reminds me of the iPhone 5 and the iPhone SE, the original, like it's glossy at the bottom, like the little band there. Super tastefully done. The camera pod is just essentially non-existent. There's just 2 cameras protruding with those gold rings I just mentioned. The thing just looks like $1 million.
It does look good.
Right? You get a headphone jack, you get 33-watt charging and a charger in the box, which, you don't get with the $1,000 phones. And I mean, overall, there's nothing to complain about until you get to the software. And I don't want people to come away with it at this point, turn off the podcast and go, yeah, suck it. I'm not going to buy this phone because of the software. So here's what you have to understand. Compared to the N200 and the N10, this is still running Android 11, but it's not the Oxygen OS Android 11. It's ColorOS Android 11 reskinned to look like Oxygen OS. So that's what you should be upset about. But in practical everyday use, it's slightly different. It still feels very, pleasant to use. It's just not quite as smooth because you don't have 90 hertz. It's also not quite as smooth because you can see there's a bit of jerkiness in the animation. Like there's basically some optimizations that need to happen. And this is a thing that I think that for the core audience of OnePlus people is going to piss them off. But for the average users who walks in a T-Mobile store and buys this phone for $282, they're going to be super happy. This phone is fast. It's snappy. It's a Snapdragon 695 for $282. You can't go wrong with that. And here's the kicker. Because it's got a 60 hertz display and a sippy chip, like 6 nanometer, sips on battery power, it lasts forever on that 4,500 milliamp hour battery. 2 days, no problem. So what is there not to like? The cameras could be better. It could be 90 hertz. There could be an ultra wide. But the software could be the real Oxygen and not ColorOS skin to be Oxygen. But honestly, those days are over. Even the OnePlus 10 Pro has Oxygen OS that's based on ColorOS, and that sings. I mean, it's a different experience. I know a lot of you are frustrated with that, but just get over it. Like, it's not going to change. So you might as well just enjoy. It's still better than Samsung's One UI, in my opinion. It's better than ColorOS.
Hey.
It's better than LG anything.
You and I, Miriam, we could talk for hours about the fact that it's not better than One UI.
Well, I disagree, but it's better than a lot of things, and it's worse than Moto, and it's worse than Pixel, and it's worse than Sony. But that's about it. Used to be Oxygen OS was up there with Pixel, Moto, and Sony. But now, Because Sony is only good because they do nothing. It's pure Android.
It's because they don't put any money into the thing. They
Yeah.
put all of their money into cameras and still
Exactly.
fail.
I know. Moto is only good because they add those little things like the flashlight, chop, and whatever. And then, of course, Pixel is Pixel, right? But look, it's arguable. I feel like One UI is fine. I've gotten used to it, but it still feels too Samsung. It's too Korean. I don't know how to put my finger on it. It's like LG. I pulled out some old LG phones the other day, the Wing, and I'm like, man, this thing is Korean. I feel like I'm in IKEA. You know, there's a vibe to it.
So, okay, I disagree. And the reason I'll tell you is I think it purely comes down to personal preference. And this is why I think, to tie it all in, the core OnePlus audience isn't going to be happy with,
of course not.
Based on Color OS. Because the reason I think One UI is the best UX on the
oh, come on,
experience,
Pixel? Come on.
not a fan of Pixel. Do you know why? Because I do not like the fact that, let me go back to why I love One UI, why
Sure.
I used to love Oxygen OS.
Oh, yeah. The snappiness is gone.
No, it's not even snappiness. I like having I can deal with a slight performance drop in exchange for having every single option to change anything I could ever want. And this is where LG
This is where Nova Launcher comes into play.
I disagree, because I think even when I use my Pixel, I get frustrated because I'm like, I need to download an app to do that. I need to go and that doesn't work this way. I don't do that. That said, I've been used to One UI for so long that it's a personal thing. And the core OnePlus audience are so used to a certain way of thinking and approaching UX that to then be given this is what's going to be an issue for them.
My biggest issue is not so much that it's not as customizable. My biggest issue is that you can see ColorOS through the cracks. You go in the settings menu, and it feels like you're on an Oppo phone, okay? It feels like a Realme phone. And that's okay for me because I use Oppo and Realme phones, but it's not okay for the OnePlus Oxygen OS crew, and I get that. But my biggest gripe is that telepathic speed that you had on the OnePlus 7 Pro, on the OnePlus 7T, even dare I say on the original software of the OnePlus 8 and 8 Pro. That insane snappiness, your finger...
You fly through everything.
It's like you felt like your brain could go faster because your fingers, it would keep up with them. And that, I have never seen a phone ever, it doesn't matter what, that is as good as the OnePlus 7 Pro and 7T were at the height of Oxygen OS. And if you're upset about that, folks, I hear you and I validate you and I approve. I agree, but it's gone. That's been 2 years. That's been 3 years ago, folks. And we're not going to get it back. And I don't think you can scream and kick until it comes back. It's just not going to happen. So my opinion, OnePlus 10 Pro today, with its existing ColorOS modified to look like Oxygen OS, and even the Find X5 Pro with pure ColorOS are super fast and slick. I feel like it's almost there. Now, they're flagships and they're using the best chips and the best everything, right? But, Pixel is not in that league. Pixel's never been fast. Never felt fast. Moto, not really. Nokia or Sony, which are also pure Android, not really. So we lost that. We lost a big thing here with Oxygen OS going ColorOS. And I want to acknowledge that. But at the same time, you can't change reality. And on this phone, the N20 5G, yes, you feel it. It's a little more sluggish than Oxygen OS 11 was on the N10 last year. But at the same time, it's not sluggish enough to slow you down and annoy you. It's just noticeable if you come from that past experience. And most people are not going to come from that past experience. And there's enough customizations there that it works. Back to your talking about One UI, I cannot stand the fact that the app tray needs to scroll horizontally. I'm a vertical app tray person, and I cannot deal with that. It's the only, every single Samsung phone that I get right now, I put Nova only because I want to scroll vertically in my app tray. And it's such a small thing. That's why I just seriously, why?
So I will say, despite everything I've said, I still like I like a lot about Samsung's, One UI. We are tangenting, but this is ironic, okay?
No, it's just exactly what this podcast is about.
I like a lot, but I don't like the fact that they get bigger screens with more dents, and they still, like, every Samsung review I've written for the last 4 years has involved the words, but if only One UI would decrease the grid sizes so we could have more options on the display, etc. So, aside from the Fold, which is a nightmare to run any other launcher apart from One UI on, I have my S22 Ultra right now as my second daily, and that is running Nova.
See, so even you admit that One UI is flawed.
No. So I never said it was perfect. I still said it's my favorite because Nova is the great home screen and the app drawer. But then I love the fact that I can dig into the settings menu, and this is why there are certain... I used the Oppo Find N for a little while.
Yeah, it's a good phone.
And I really liked... I mean, I didn't like the size. I thought it was just a bit too short for me, but...
That's actually my favorite part, was the size.
I loved this, like, part of the software with that customization.
I hate the Fold because I find that I do not have any use... Like, I don't multitask with Windows. I multitask with apps on the screen, and I flip between them like cards, right? So for me, having a bigger screen... If I don't benefit from the real estate on half the apps, I don't care, right? But that's why I love the N, because if I wanted a compact one-handed phone, it was the size of an iPhone mini in the front. And then if I open it up, I now had 7 inches, and I could actually use it one app at a time with a lot of space, right?
Do you know what?
I didn't try to use it like a tablet ever,
I've got the Vivo Fold coming. I imported it, and I cannot wait, because I just want the cameras. That's the thing I'm like... The reason I use an S22 Ultra is because fundamentally the cameras on the Fold are horrible. But give me the Vivo, and if it's anywhere near as good with some customization, I'm like, well, let's see if we can daily drive this with T-Mobile. This will be interesting.
Yeah, you're not going to get 5G in the US. I'm telling you right now.
No, you will. There's a couple of bands it supports, but it's not a huge amount.
I have tested almost every single Vivo and Oppo phone here in the US. Even though they have the right bands, they will show you the 5G logo, but when you actually check, you're in 4G always.
Oh, well.
Just know that. Even Huawei will show you the 5G logo on their Kirin phones, like the P40 Pro and P40 Pro Plus will absolutely give you the 5G logo when you're on T-Mobile. They detect that it's a 5G network. They cannot connect as 5G. They stick to LTE, and it's always LTE. Do a speed test and you'll get LTE. Run the thing that tells you which network you're connected to in your LTE. So my friend, yes, you will see the 5G logo on that Vivo phone. You will not be on 5G.
Well, that's disappointing. That said, it'll be interesting. I feel like it's going to need heavy modification of the software.
No, absolutely. I think being on 4G is not going to kill you. Like right now, I'm using the P50 Pro from Huawei. The camera is fantastic, as you'd expect. And it's the Snapdragon 888 4G, right? Like it's the one that's like, it's got the 5G disabled. And frankly, that thing flies. And it's just on 4G, I have zero issues using it out there. I mean, the lack of GMS is a bigger issue than, anything on that phone. Everything else about it is fantastic. The display, the wireless charging, the speed. You want snappy? I hate to tell you this, folks, but grab a phone from Huawei with a Kirin chip, an older one like a P40, or grab that brand new Snapdragon 888 based P50 and use Harmony OS, which we all know is Android. And man, that thing just...
It's not Android. You're not allowed to say those words.
And man, that thing just flies. It flies. It's so fast. It's almost as fast as the OnePlus we remembered. And that's the thing. Huawei has always had really snappy, like EMUI back in the day on the P30. Remember when it was still GMS? Man, that was one slick experience. If you have a P30 Pro, folks, hang on to it. Because that thing still runs GMS.
So I'm annoyed because I have 2 P30 Pros. One is permanently bricked, and the other I broke the display.
Oh, is that the one you used to white water raft and stuff, and then it got wet and it's got the camera doesn't work?
No, this one was one we tried to run a beta on. But what I do miss is the fact that, you know what? EMUI, that was another... I liked it a lot. Because yes, you'd have to make some tweaks to it with like Nova and stuff like that. But what I really liked about it was, much like One UI, Huawei gave you the option to do everything.
Oh, yeah. And Harmony OS, honestly, is, other than the name, it's pretty much like EMUI you remember, okay? So
Okay.
I think you'll like it. In fact, parts of if you drill into the, like, menus that tell you like status and like, all that information, serial number, versions of software, it says EMUI on it, part of it. It's so janky. They forgot to translate some stuff or whatever.
I mean, you can't. That's a 7-hour podcast just there talking about Huawei.
But no, I want to segue quickly into, I'm getting a Magic 4 review unit sometime soon, the Magic 4 Pro from Honor, and that's the best of both worlds. Because as you know, their OS is still pretty much EMUI, but with GMS.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see, to go back to using some of their phones, because Honor, it's like, I'm looking at that now.
Well, if you look at the specs of the Honor Magic,
it's insane.
The Magic 4 Pro, right?
Yeah.
That was announced at MWC, and you look at the specs of the P50 Pro, other than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 versus Snapdragon 888, look at the camera specs for a second and come back to me. Because
I'm just doing a comparison right now.
You know how it takes 18 months, right? It takes 18 months to develop a product from beginning to end, right?
Yep.
18 months ago, they were still one company. So these phones are essentially the same hardware, right? And they're running slightly different software.
You said P50 or P50 Pro?
P50 Pro versus Magic 4 Pro. Look at the specs right now. Do the GSM Arena comparison, and you'll see. Look at the cameras. Tell me you don't see some odd similarities there.
I do. It's just interesting. The only difference is probably the ultra wide.
That 3.5x periscope telephoto is highly suspect to be exactly the same.
No, that's going to be the same.
Including the main sensor.
The only difference is probably the ultra wide.
Yeah, the ultra wide's the only big difference. And in fact, if you look carefully, right, the Honor Magic 4 Pro spec-wise was pretty much going to be the Huawei flagship. So I think what happened here is when Huawei realized that they were losing their grip on the phone market and let go of Honor, they said to Honor, hey, you can take the lead, right? Because we are going to focus on cars and other things so we can stay relevant.
Wow, hold up. Even the charging speeds, this is all...
That's what I'm saying. Look at the specs. The Honor is the flagship from Huawei, like it was meant to be back then before they split up. And it became that. And the P50 Pro is more like kind of a light version, I guess?
It's almost like the P50 Pro, like the Magic 4 Pro would have been the P50 Pro Plus.
Correct. But you know that there is a Magic 4 Ultimate that's even better than that.
Oh, this I'm literally looking at that right now. Oh,
look at the main sensor on that. It's a massive main sensor.
That launched 1 week ago.
F of a 1.6.
So it's an f1.6. Oh, hello.
Yeah, and look at the size of the sensor. That's the only difference between the two phones. Is the sensor, the main sensor is bigger and the f-stop is faster. And then, of course, because it's got a sloped back to accommodate the much bigger Z-depth of the camera, it no longer has the 100-watt wireless charging. It has 50-watt wireless charging because they couldn't make the coils. I think they have 2 coils on that for parallel charging on that 100-watt. So
wait, hold up. Doesn't it have the Magic 4 Ultimate has 4 rear cameras?
Correct. It has an extra one. It's got the spectral camera that we find in the P50 Pro.
Funny that. Interesting.
Huh.
This is
See, spectral camera. Who else has a spectral camera? Huawei. Same specs. How interesting.
No, this is fascinating.
Like, there's still so much of that going on. So, in another year, if we start seeing similarities like this in these phones, I'm sorry to tell you folks that the 18 months is up. And, like, Huawei's / Honor are pulling some wool over our eyes because
that ain't a bad thing. I'll tell you that now. Like, yeah, I hate the deception, but if it means that Huawei is
it's not a bad thing, but something's going on here. Like,
if there's anything to that, we know what's going to happen. They're going to very quickly, they're going to end up on the bloody list again. And
well, some politicians have already suggested it.
Oh, there we go. And so it begins.
Anyway, no, but these suggestions have been floating around for 6 months and nothing's happened. So I don't think Biden's going to do anything. But anyway, I could be wrong. The point is, we look at that. We had this incredible discussion. We covered everything about the N20 that I want to cover. Look, it's a great phone, folks. If you want an affordable budget phone in the US, you're on T-Mobile. This is better than any Moto G. This is better than any generic like Revel phone that T-Mobile sells. I think you can't go wrong with this thing. But if you're a hardcore OnePlus user and you're on a budget, I'd say save your money and buy a Nord 2 or Nord 3 when it comes and import it. Because you might not get 5G, but you're definitely going to get a better experience. Even though it's still going to be ColorOS based. So, maybe buy an old OnePlus 7 Pro and don't update it. I don't know if that's dangerous, but your security updates are going to be an issue. Anyway.
Well, talking of, saving up and buying things, I'm so tempted to spend, and talking of Huawei, lots of segues, I'm very, very, very tempted to buy the Mate XS2. I don't know why.
Yeah. Honestly, nothing appeals to me about that phone because it's just an upgraded version of the XS or whatever. 10S.
But I really like I think I have either the X or the XS, and I really like it.
Yeah, the problem with me is that it opens the wrong way.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to wear out. It's not going to be a practical phone for most people. And again, Snapdragon 888 4G versus the Kirin before it, which had 5G, which was probably faster. I'm not sure you want that. What is better about it other than the different chip? Is it a better camera system? I don't think so. It looks like it's basically a very mildly upgraded Mate XS or Mate 10s.
It's way cheaper.
Okay.
The original Mate XS was $2,600 US. This one's about $1,500.
Okay, fair enough. This price is definitely, and I mean, they probably improved the hinge and stuff because, they keep refining that. But honestly, you talked about the Vivo Fold. I'd get that. I'd even get the Honor Magic V, which is the folding phone from them, before I got this.
Yeah, I will say having, that's...
no periscope lens on this. Why would you bother? You already have a phone with a decent camera. You want the periscope, and that's where the Vivo comes in, and where, what's the other phone that has a periscope on it? The previous Huawei folding phone. The one that folds normally. They made one that... That was worth it. It's really expensive, though.
It's not the Pocket, was it? No, it wasn't the Pocket.
No, I'm not talking about the flip thing. I'm talking about a fold thing. Anyway, let's move on to the Motos. We talk about Moto and baseline camera performance. Haha.
You're funny. I love it.
Okay, look, I reviewed the Moto Edge Plus a month ago for Geekspin. We covered this on the podcast. And other than, again, being overpriced, it was a great phone. It was the first time I've used a Moto phone since the original Edge Plus that I felt was like, oh, you made a good phone. I'm happy with. The camera is decent and et cetera, and wireless charging and all that. But it's still too expensive. It's missing a telephoto and it's got a plastic frame. It feels more like a OnePlus 9 instead of OnePlus 9 Pro if you do the equivalence, right? Remember the OnePlus 9 that had the plastic frame, no OIS, and some corners cut that were really silly. But anyway, this thing looks like it might come to the US as a Moto Edge 2022 non-plus because it's basically, there is an Edge 30 Pro, which is the equivalent to the Edge Plus in the US. And this looks like the Edge 30, which would eventually possibly come to the US as the Edge, right? So
you lost me. Just in that one like 2 sentences, I'm just like, hold up. I have no, I get it now, but I'm like, imagine if...
That's the problem with Moto, right? They have so many names for the same phones.
I love that we're both on the same page of like, it takes longer to talk about what this damn product is than to talk about what the actual product does.
Exactly. So the Edge Plus in the US is essentially the Edge 30 Pro abroad. And we don't have an Edge normal in the US right now for 2022, but they just launched an Edge 30 in the rest of the world, which would be what we expect an Edge non-plus to be for us. Oh God, that's way too complicated.
I know.
God, why? Moto.
Although I give credit to Adam for writing 6 lines that kind of explains it.
I mean, Adam is gonna be good at that, right? Also, who you want Adam to write that because he would make sense of it.
Yeah, I'd be sitting there going, someone else take this. I'm not
Look,
writing
the
this.
takeaway, folks, is that compared to our Edge Plus, this thing basically just is, got a Snapdragon 778G instead of the 8 Gen 1. And, camera system looks pretty similar. It probably doesn't have the OIS anymore. And it probably doesn't have wireless charging, which the Edge Plus does. And then, again, it's going to come to the US as an unlocked, overpriced, phone from Moto.
I mean, it's got a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. No.
4,020, but whatever.
Oh, sorry.
Close enough. Look,
20 milliamp
we
hours
can move on. I'm just saying, I want people to understand this phone happened, and it means very likely that we're going to get a version in the US for that. And because we just got the Edge Plus on Verizon with an unlocked version coming at some point in the future, I think the unlocked version is going to be a non-plus. It's going to be this guy. Because, at the prices, see, that's what I'm saying. At the prices that Moto is asking for, the unlocked version of the Edge Plus would have to be so expensive that it would be almost cost as much as an S22 Ultra. And at that point, forget it. The S22 Ultra is massively better, right? So anyway, another phone that I think is more exciting that came out, since we talked about Xiaomi earlier, who is the king, the queen of part spinning, is the Poco F4 GT, which is the gaming phone, by the way, that Poco made last year as well. They had a GT phone last year.
I have to say, this thing looks sexy.
I know, but the Poco phones always look cool. And you know what? They never send me the yellow ones. Like, if you're listening, Xiaomi PR, send me the Poco phones in yellow. It's your brand color. Like, every time you send me a black one, like, look at the photo here in that article. The black one doesn't look cool. It's the yellow one you want. So, but here's the thing.
Yeah, the yellow one has that almost like a gaming stripe to it.
That's exactly, but it is a gaming phone. Like, it has these mechanical keys. So the shoulder keys are recessed, and there's little sliders. You can go click and then clunk. They come out, right? And then you actually get
crap. This is nuts.
Real like shoulder button. That's the same they did last year with the GT. But here's the thing. This is a rebranded. Again, this is exactly what I was telling you about earlier. You know how BBK Group part spins, but there's slight differences between the models. This is literally exactly the same as the Redmi K50G, which is the gaming phone that Redmi launched like a month or two ago. So
this is wild specs.
I mean, look at the specs and look at the price.
What's the price tag?
Right? I mean, it's really affordable. That's the
Yo!
Right?
This is crazy.
I mean,
I would buy one for gaming.
Exactly. So I want to remind everyone that the Red Magic 7 and the 7 Pro, which is a little more expensive, starts at $649 in the US and officially supports T-Mobile 5G properly. So if you're looking for a gaming phone, by the time you import this thing, it's going to be close, So maybe Red Magic. But the software on the Poco is going to be better than the Red Magic software. And the cameras on the Poco are going to be better too. So, tough one. But look at those specs.
I do feel like, a couple of years ago, before, the Chinese and the Huawei US stuff happened, there was all that talk of Xiaomi going for the, eventually entering the US market. If they ever do it in an official way, I feel like you can rip up the market and start again. It's going to be that transformative in so many ways.
But will the Americans ever let them? That's the thing. Like, protectionism is so rampant in this country right now. I don't even think a Chinese brand has a chance. I think OnePlus is the last one that kind of squeezed in somehow. And I think a lot of that to do with CarPay and then T-Mobile and John Ledger. That's actually how you say it, believe it or not. Like a ledger, yeah.
I thought it was Legit. I don't know why.
It's Ledger. It's John Ledger. But anyway, the point is, you look at the specs on this, right? Real quick. Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, 120 Hz refresh rate on the AMOLED, right? Of course. You've got 120 watt charging, like a couple of other Xiaomi phones now. You got 4,700 milliamp hour battery. You got an ultra wide, a 64 megapixel IMX686, a true valued, well-tuned sensor with Poco's imaging pipeline. That thing's gonna sing. And we're gonna get 5G, of course, in some markets on this. Wi-Fi 6E, like because it's an 8 Gen 1, it's got all those goodies that come in for free, basically. Big screen, 6.67 inch. I mean,
the DCI-P3 color gamma, HDR10 plus, 800.
I know everything is just
it's like this is really impressive.
Metal frame glass back. Holy crap balls, this thing is good.
The good thing is it's almost certainly going to end up launching in Europe, which means I will buy one when I end up in Europe.
Well, you should. And I mean, look, this is the thing. Like you can already buy this as a K50G, right, from Redmi. Either way, you buy one of these, it's just cosmetics, right? And look at that display, guys. Look at the lack of bezels. Look at the fact that everything is symmetric and perfectly lined up. Like $532. So you know when you import it, it's going to be $600. But, you know, again, the Red Magic has all that metal frame, glass back. It has a nice big AMOLED that's 165 hertz on the Red Magic, which is crazy. But like, I think this looks way cooler. I love the squarishness of the design. It looks like more like an iPhone.
I just want the yellow back. That's hot.
I've asked them for a review in it. I hope they just send me one. This is the hottest Poco phone in a long time. Like the thing about this is it's like the Red Magic 6R last year, which was a gaming phone because it had shoulder buttons, but it looked like a normal phone. Like it looked like a flagship. It didn't look like a gaming phone in the sense that, you know, it wasn't over the top gaudy in design. That's kind of what this is. It's a gaming phone, yes, but it's not sacrificing camera performance or usability. It still has a hole punch. It's, you know, whereas the Red Magic, it's kind of big and clunky. It's got the fan in there. It's heavy. It's thick. You know, this thing just, you can slip in your pocket, pull it out, looks sexy.
I agree.
I don't know. I was excited about this before I put it in the topics. And now that I've talked with you about it, I just want one so bad. Nirav, what have you done?
I have an ability to make people buy things.
I know you're good at it. Did you see the Nothing launcher? What have you played with it? Nothing gave us their launcher for the Nothing phone as a beta to install from the Play Store.
So I've got to be honest. I'll tell you what my interest in Nothing as a whole is.
Nothing.
And the reason being is when OnePlus came out, Carl did a really good job of it became a brand that had substance. There is nothing that has been said so far that makes me think this is anything other than a way to trade on past successes, you know?
Yeah.
And even looking at I'm like, oh, great, it's a launcher. I don't really care. Call it a cynic, but I'd be shocked if this phone actually had any value. And you know why I'm a cynic? It's because I remember the days of the Essential. When everyone
or Next Bit Robin?
Yeah, everyone went crazy over these things. And they ended up in the grand scheme of things to just be a disappointment. I also think the concept of calling a company Nothing is pretty stupid. Sorry, Carl, I love you to bits, but I think it's a bad brand because
it's
meme-worthy.
It's definitely difficult because it's confusing when you talk to people. And I think that was kind of the intent, but it's Carl sometimes just gets carried away in the marketing and hype machine. Have you noticed that? And I love him dearly, but I want whatever you were doing with Nord at OnePlus. I know that it rubbed the, Oppo, machine the wrong way because I don't think they made enough money on that phone because it was so good for the money. And like, I'm making this up. Like, I have nothing to back this up, but I think Carl left in part because him and Pete didn't see eye to eye on the future of OnePlus, knowing what OnePlus has developed into since he left, and knowing that the Nord was such a phenomenally awesome phone that really fit the OnePlus branding so well, but that wasn't the direction Oppo wanted to take OnePlus or BBK wanted to take OnePlus. what he really needs to do is kind of stop with the gimmicks, the weird name and the transparency stuff, which I think is cool. I've got the earbuds. They're pretty decent. I like them. But like, give us a phone like the Nord. Give us something that we can sink our teeth into that is no nonsense. And
I mean, listen to this. The industry loves Carl Pei. And yet, you take a look. I've just opened the listing for the Nothing launcher. 416 reviews on Google Play, even though it's a beta. Total score, 3.0. That
very middling, huh?
Says so much. This ain't average people downloading it. These are the same people that should be getting excited. And you've given them nothing to get excited about.
Exactly. You've given them nothing. Look, we could go on, but the bottom line is, if you're listening, Carl, and I know that you and I have talked in the past, like, I love what you're doing. I want to see this phone come to fruition, but maybe like tone down the marketing a bit and give us more substance, because you've done it before and you have an entire voracious early adopter tech savvy audience right now that's pissed off about the whole ColorOS, Oxygen OS stuff. So, maybe instead of like a weird launcher, I mean, it's not weird, it's just there. Don't just give us an OS that's sleek. That's what we all want and need. So, yeah. So, hey, let's quickly talk about the Pixel Watch leak and wrap things up. We kind of have to. Google I/O is coming up pretty soon, and I'm pretty sure we're going to see a Pixel 6a, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Pixel Watch. So isn't this hilarious? I just put it on here because it's hilarious to me that, yet again, it was found in a bar in San Francisco. Like, what is this with the engineers that work at Apple and Google? How is it?
I feel like they just do it for the hell of it.
You can be daft enough to lose a prototype in a freaking bar of all places. Like, what is wrong with you people?
It's the running meme and joke of the tech industry. That said, let me say, this might be the only time I say this. I'm actually excited for this. I use an Apple Watch because we all know it's like the best.
Best, yeah.
By far. The only thing, like, I like the fact that this is circular. I don't like the fact that the bottom isn't flat and it's this weird domey shape, and the fact that it's not...
it's definitely convex is the word I want to use.
And the fact it's these proprietary pins and stuff like that. But you know what's going to prevent the Pixel Watch from being a success?
Everything?
Well, wait. If I could boil it down to one thing, the biggest thing that will prevent the Pixel Watch from being a success is Google. Because we do not know how they're going to screw it up, other than having true faith that they are going to screw it up in some way.
I mean, they're already talking about a limited release. That's a screw up right there. And
Jesus
then,
Christ.
The other thing that we have to keep in mind here is that, Samsung still wants to call the shots on this Wear OS 3 stuff. So I don't know. Like, I want to like it. I'm a Pixel user. My main phone's a 6 Pro, and I'm very happy with it. Unlike a lot of people, which, I've none of the issues people are having. I'm having with that phone. It's been rock solid for me. It's not the best phone, but for what I want and what I need, it's great. So I'd be happy to have a Pixel Watch to go alongside it, but I have no delusions that... I kind of feel like Android Wear is over, okay? Like, I hate to say it's Apple Watch, or get one of those, like this Huawei Watch 3 GT, 2-week battery life. It's a dumb watch. It's a fitness band on steroids. All it gives me is notification. It tracks my sleep and tracks my fitness and health. And it does all of that really well. I don't need apps. I don't need to talk to Siri. I don't need to worry about like running Google Maps on my freaking watch. Okay. I have a phone that I can pull out of my pocket for that. That's my take.
Yeah. We'll see whether it proves to be anything.
Google I/O would tell all.
Exactly.
How do you feel about the Europeans wanting USB-C and potentially forcing Apple to put it on their iPhones? I'm kind of into it.
I like it, but I have a feeling that Apple will go a step further, go portless, and go wireless charging only.
Yeah, and that's fine, honestly.
Yeah. It will be nice to be done with Lightning, even though I now have 700 USB-C to Lightning.
Because frankly, MagSafe is great, right? And some Android phone have adopted it now. Nubia made a phone with perfectly compatible with the same magnets as MagSafe in the back. And it's, of course, Qi wireless charging underneath, right? So I'm kind of like, they're not going to put a USB-C port on these phones. They're just going to give you a puck that clunks onto the back of your phone and has USB-C on the puck.
No. So yeah,
Right?
they'll give you the puck to start, and then they will remove the puck from the box.
Of course. But the puck here, without a cable, is what I'm saying. The puck will just have a USB-C port on it to give the finger to the Europeans. We put a USB-C port on it.
Oh, that's genius. I like that.
Right? See what I'm saying? That would be the ultimate FU, right? Listen, I know we have to wrap up. Do you want to tell folks on the show where they can find you on the internet, your social media handles, and all that other good stuff?
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. My name is Nirav. You can find me at Nirav on Twitter, at NiravG on Instagram, and on xda-developers.com and pocketnow.com.
Yes, folks, you should definitely follow Nirav on Twitter and read XDA and Pocket Now, okay? So you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, that's TNKGRL on Instagram and on Twitter. That's like the comic book character Tankgirl, but drop the vowels. If you want to chat about this podcast with Nirav and I, please do it on Twitter. It's a good place. You can also do it on Instagram, but it's harder to have a thread there. Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones and pretty pictures taken with phones. I do a lot of pictures of cars as well, since I cover cars for Tech Radar. And yeah, there is a couple of YouTube channels you should subscribe to as well. YouTube.com/MobileTechPodcast and YouTube.com/MobileTechMore. These are complements to the podcast with some visuals. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the little notification bell, comment in the comments. You can also comment about the podcast on YouTube. I'll check it out. The main channel is all about smartphones, smartwatches, and audio devices, headphones, earbuds. The second channel, the More channel, is all about the other stuff that relates to your phone, travel tech, car tech, home automation, that kind of stuff. And of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, everywhere good podcasts can be found. Please subscribe, tell your friends. And if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. It helps for discoverability. Also, we have a Patreon. If you really want to help and support the podcast financially, Patreon is the way to go. Patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's Patreon.com/TNKGRL. We have a bunch of tiers there. One of them is to watch this podcast on video with my guest. And for that, you get kind of a more raw, less edited version, and you get it before the audio version a little bit, like a day or two. So basically, it's a good deal. You get to watch us, you get it a little earlier. That's one tier. The other one is, of course, a Discord server. If you want to chat with me, that's an opportunity to do that. So please consider helping out with Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. And if you don't like Patreon, I get it. That's cool. There's a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click through and buy me a coffee or lunch or something and support that way. But again, your financial help will really go a long way, and I would appreciate you considering either Patreon or the PayPal donation link. Finally, I want to thank our sponsor, Audible. Audible's been with us since the early days of the show, and they're awesome. If you love books as much as I do, you should check out Audible. Audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL for this, and it gives you a 30-day free trial, and you get to keep a book at the end. Audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So you're going to say, why should I join? Well, if you're not already a member, Audible's got an incredible selection of audiobooks. And, you know, if you're like me and you love books, but your eyes are tired because you work all day on your computer and you want to chill out at the end of the day, isn't it so much nicer to put on a pair of headphones or earbuds and just listen to a book rather than, you know, read one on a screen, even a Kindle? You know, you can rest your eyes while you enjoy the experience. They have a ton of selections. They have short form content, short stories. They have podcasts. And of course, they have tons of books read by the authors, an incredible selection. It's fantastic. So I want to thank Audible again for being our long-time sponsor. They've been with us forever and we appreciate them. Audibletrial.com/mobiletech is the URL if you want to support us. Click through. And of course, Nirav, I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me. This is always delightful. I love it.
Absolutely. We'll have you on at some point again in the future. And folks, of course, we'll have another show next week, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.